Essentially, the narrative that I want Africa to have is that Africa is this birthplace of potential, that Africa produces great leaders, that Africa is this place where young people are leading changes in their communities, where Africa is not a dark continent, but it's a continent of light, but also that it's not the continent of warfare and ethnic cleansing, but rather it's the continent of understanding that, yes, people are different to me, but what can I learn from their differences?
Hello and welcome to the Ndini podcast. I'm Sandra Chuma. Every week, I'm bringing you conversations with bold, inspiring, trailblazing, and influential women of African descent. These are women from all walks of life, women who are entrepreneurs, artists, social activists, athletes. Each one of them, in their own way, is changing the narrative on what it means to be an African woman. They'll be telling us about their journeys and sharing their secrets to success. And I hope that by hearing their inspiring stories, you will be inspired. First of all, thank you. I know I've been trying to make this happen for a little bit, and you're both incredibly busy ladies, but I'm so glad that I can finally chat to you. How are you doing today?
We're doing well.
Are you both, Where are you both based?
I'm based in Princeton, New Jersey, and Farai's in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Farai, I know for a time you were in London. Are you done now with your studies in London?
Yes. My studies are actually due. My dissertation is due at the end of this month, so next week Friday. And then I graduate next year in January. So it's been an amazing journey, and I'm just very, very excited that that I can say I've had my master's.
Congratulations. That's no small feat. So congratulations to you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
And Reanne, what are you doing in Princeton? Why don't we start with, before we even get into what are you doing and where are you, why don't we start with you ladies introducing yourselves for anybody who doesn't know who you are. Please introduce yourselves and tell me what it is you do. So let's start with you, Reanne.
Oh, okay. Me first. Yeah, I'm Reanne Olivier. I am the program manager for Princeton in Africa, which is a fellowship program that takes recent college graduates and young professionals into a one-year fellowship in an organization within the African continent. My background, I guess, I studied at Stellenbosch University, South Africa. I lived, worked, and studied there I lived there for 5 years, worked and studied for about 7 years, actually, and continuing now. And I am a native New Yorker. Ethnically, I am Haitian American.
I'm interested to know, you're a native New Yorker. Why the interest in Africa?
The interest in Africa is quite multifaceted. It kind of stems from why I even lived and studied in South Africa. So my father, who's also Haitian, an Haitian immigrant, always had this love and admiration for the continent. And this was something that sparked upon him by a colleague of his in the early 90s. And so his colleague invited him to South Africa. And then from there, my mother and my father had been visiting South Africa periodically. And then from there, he kind of, it is just from the stories that they've shared, the pictures that they shared of how advanced and how great people of Africa are, that kind of stimulated my interest to the continent. And then when I finally visited in 2009, I felt that same energy that he would constantly explain. I felt like I was home. So it's more of a spiritual concept of, feeling at home in Africa. I never really felt comfortable in the United States, or I didn't feel my whole self until I moved to South Africa. And then from there, South Africa is has cosmopolitan nationals living there. And so I've just basically ingrained myself with African culture. I didn't really hang out with expats. I never really had an interest to. I traveled various countries in the continent, and I just felt that there's so much potential, especially from my upbringing growing up in America and being in the education system, of how they continuously say that, people in Africa don't have the privileges that you do in terms of like education. They're not intelligent as you are. And so being there, and then also from the stories of my parents, it was just like, this isn't true. African people are very intelligent. We should tell that by the African immigrants who come over to America in particular, and their children, and how they thrive in education. And so meeting other Africans who felt that I was superior because of my nationality made me very concerned. And so I just wanted them to see what I see in them, that they are definitely, though it sounds cliche, but they are definitely the future of tomorrow, and that they need to own who they are. They need to own their culture, they need to own their intelligence, and they need to own their future.
That's so profound what you just said, because as you rightly point out, like particularly for us as Africans, we always aspire to, it must be in the Western world or in the quote unquote first world, so it must be better. And so you're someone who's very different in that you are coming from, you're coming from New York and going to South Africa. And so tell me about your time and your experience at Stellenbosch.
Stellenbosch for me was a very difficult but very thriving time for me. I went through a lot of personal issues, financial and academic issues when I was there, but I think for me, my strategy was like, I'm here to get a degree, and I'm here to be the best person that I always wanted to be.
So Farai, why don't you tell us who you are and a little bit about your background?
So I am Farai Mubaiwa, and I was born in South Africa. My father is from Zimbabwe, and my mother is South African. And yeah, I think it's really interesting having grown up in a house where there was a mix of culture and constantly learning about the value, of appreciating people from other African countries. I learned about Sankara and Samora Machel and all these amazing African leaders before it was very popular to know about them. And I think it's because of the household I grew up in. And I think I'd always been very passionate about uplifting the continent. And it's definitely stemmed from two different things. I think firstly, the fact that there was constantly this divide between Africans. So with the xenophobic attacks that happened in SA, it was really, really upsetting that such attacks were happening, yet we're of the same people. And I think, in fact, we must use the words Afrophobic, or rather Afrophobia, because it's very common for South Africans to attack Black Africans, to say that, they don't actually belong here. Yet they won't do the same to white Africans from Kenya or something like that. And it's because of this perception of the Black person here to steal your job or your resources. So there's definitely this lack of African unity and the differences in how we treated people because of their African heritage. The other reason was definitely the fact that because of the negative perceptions that the media has created of Africa, so many young people buy into these perceptions. I've met people, particularly young Africans from different countries, who say, oh my word, I can't wait until I can move to a different country. And they often talk about the US, the UK, or Australia. And I think it's sad, especially because with Africa's emerging youth demographic, we can't have millions of young Africans growing up wanting to move to where they perceive the grass to be greener. Because then what happens to the continent itself? There's no enrichment that happens. There's no skills development. There's no retention of good talent. So that definitely then led me to say, I want to start something that is able to educate Africans about Africa, for Africa to matter. And one of the first people I approached is Reanne, because we still are not even 100% sure how we met. But somehow we met, probably through networking or something like that. And we just clicked. And because we clicked, we then had a lot of trust for each other. And because of the trust that we had in each other, we then were trying to conceptualize, how do we build this organization? And we've gone through various phases. I mean, initially it was just conceptualized as just a hashtag to raise awareness.
And why was it, like, if I can just interrupt you and ask you, why was it that specific hashtag? Like, why Africa Matters?
Because we felt that the perception of Africa is always so negative. And because of the fact that, I mean, if you see, so I think what really, really sparked us to call it Africa Matters was that in January 2015, there were the Charlie Hebdo attacks in France. And like what Reanne said, so many of our friends and family stood in solidarity with the French. And, you know, understandably so, it was an awful attack. 2 days later, there were attacks in Baga in Nigeria. 2,000 people were massacred. We did not see I am Baga t-shirts. We did not see hashtag I am Baga. We did not see hashtag pray for Nigeria. And then we started to think, when do African lives matter? And when are we just disposable? And do African lives even matter? Does Africa as a continent even matter? So because of that, we then named the movement Africa Matters, which has been really interesting whenever we meet people to say, yeah, this is Africa Matters. Most often, the initial response is, yes, Africa does matter. You know, and I think that's been really, really important for us in the sense that we want Africa to matter to Africans, because for us to change our own narrative, we have to know our narrative. We have to acknowledge our narrative and understand it. And so, yeah, we've definitely taken different shapes and forms, initially starting out as a hashtag where we ran various educational campaigns on our online platforms, and then people wanted more. So then we went into workshops, we went into summits, and we've then grown and I think changed a lot to get to where we are today, which is where we've got our two core programs, which is the Africa Matters Ambassadors Program, which is open to young Africans at the moment from Rwanda, Kenya, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. And then we have our Schools Leadership Development Program, which is mainly based in South African schools. And the main reason or the main purpose behind these programs is to equip African youth with the skills and tools so that they can run community impact projects. We want young people to use what they've learned to run community impact projects that are sustainable and that are measurable.
So, Reanne, I'll ask you this question. So you have this, Farai comes to you and says, hey, I have this idea, you know, this is what I think we should do. How do you go from an idea to where you are now? Because, of course, all of these programs, everything requires money. How did you go about actually starting and funding all of the work that you've been doing?
Oh, goodness. So we actually started with nothing. We were both students. We received allowances, and the allowances were never enough to cover like any aspect of the organization. However, within my time in Stellenbosch, Farai and I built really good relationships with various departments or individuals within the university or even outside. So we really utilize and capitalize on the networks and partnerships that we had. So Farai and I, initially when we were starting the team, we kind of hand selected individuals who we thought would either be good in execution. And well, actually, first of all, you have to have love and appreciation for the continent, and you genuinely feel like that there is progression that's going to be happening. You want to be part of that. And then secondly, we were looking for people who had various skills in execution and coordination, in writing, in photography, et cetera, et cetera. And then so from there...
Were all of these people volunteering their time?
Yeah. They understood that this isn't something that we can, financially provide for them or even for ourselves, that this is what, like, we were very upfront at the beginning that this is pro bono, this is volunteer work. Are you interested? Are you keen? And they were keen simply by the type of movement we were trying to do. So we always put our cards on the table, and we're very open, and we state that, look, we do not have funds. We're just a small team, and we're just trying to, land on our feet. Can you support? And people loved it. Anything, I don't know. It's always this excitement to see other people who are doing things for the continent. So they gave us venue space. They would donate money for catering or for photography or for printing of stationery. And we, in terms of like speakers, we would try as much as possible to also indicate to prominent speakers that, look, we actually do not have funding, but would you like to come on board? Let's see what we can do. Some people have asked for stipends or honorariums, and we've negotiated with some of our partners within the institution or, externally, if they could sponsor that for us. So most of the things that we have been able to achieve have been through financial sponsorships and partnerships.
When you started, so Farai, when you went to Reanne and said, I have this idea, did you have the vision of, we're going to have fellowships, we're going to have programs, we're going to do networking, or was it just really something that naturally evolved as you went along?
Definitely a lot of trial and error and a lot of things that just naturally evolved. So I think when we started, it was just all about changing mindsets so that young people in Africa can have impact within their communities. So as mentioned, it was just started as something that was more based on social media. And as people responded really positively to what we did, then we started to get more requests for tangible learning experiences like workshops or seminars or summits. So then we ventured into that platform. And then we got more requests so usually our events would take place at universities, and young people in schools, and particularly school teachers, were like, but I want my kids to learn that before they get to university. Mm-hmm. And then Reanne and I were looking at different UN reports about Africa's emerging youth demographic, and we thought, in fact, we need to go into schools. So then that's how we then conceptualized our schools program. And then we realized that actually, we're calling ourselves Africa Matters, but at the time we're mainly operating within South Africa. Let's create an ambassadors program so we get more young Africans involved from different parts of the continent. So everything has definitely grown. And I think what's great about Reanne and I, and we work really well together because we both take a step back and say, okay, things are moving very, very quickly. Let's reconceptualize how we want this to grow, redesign strategies and new approaches, continue to grow. We've got great team members who are really, really creative. And then when we hear their different ideas and we think it's feasible, then we'll definitely go for it.
What's your vision for this organization? Where do you see it 5 years from now?
Oh, every year I get the 5-year question, and we've noticed that time has flown by. To be very frank with you, we need to cover at least 15 countries within the continent where we have stable hubs. And
how many countries do you have now?
Now we have 5.
Why don't you tell us what the 5 are that you're currently in?
So South Africa is our headquarters, Kenya, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, and Namibia.
And with those countries, was it a strategic choice? Was it how did you end up selecting those countries?
We looked at our analytics of those who follow us and who engage the most on our social media platforms, because that's basically where we gain a lot of momentum and traction is through social media. And so those were the top 4 countries, aside from South Africa, where we gained a lot of support. And so that was our strategy behind picking those 4 countries.
And so you said that your vision is that in the next, whatever the number is, 3-5 years, to expand to at least 15 countries. And what do you want to do? So you want to expand to these countries and expand what? Your programs? What is it you want to expand?
That's one element of it. We would like to expand our programs, and we would also like to have an AMI representative on the ground. So it does not necessarily have to be us as the core, but if we have someone, so like our ambassadors right now represent AMI. They are the AMI representatives that are physically on the ground. They are the ones who could be able to execute our programmatic side of our organization. They can do the workshops, they can do schools programs, they can do leadership development programs. And so within the ambassadors program, we give them training on different elements of how to be a well-rounded leader, but then also what it is that we actually do. And so their task as an ambassador is to execute a project that pertains to a particular community and then to gain traction to the organization, which would then be a ripple effect of our name then being out there.
So Farai, you talked about, part of what inspired you to start and what was the trigger for this idea for Africa Matters was the narrative around Africa. What do you think the narrative should be around Africa? Or what is the narrative you're trying to instill in the new or the young generation of Africans?
It's a very good question. So the narrative of Africa, at least for a long time, and I think to a certain extent still is, naturally being perpetuated by the current US president. But the narrative is that Africa is corrupt, Africa is poor, Africa's got no real examples of good leadership, Africa is the dark continent. And the sad thing about that narrative is that Africa currently has the largest youth population, and it will continue to grow at a rapid rate. We currently have 226 million young people between 15 and 24, meaning that if our population, especially our youth population, is expanding at a rapid rate, and they are constantly being fed this negative narrative, either through Western media, through also our everyday conversations as Africans, because we've absorbed this narrative, then this means that millions of young people are being taught that there's nothing for them on the continent, and from a young age they're aspiring to leave. So essentially, the narrative that I want Africa to have is that Africa is this birthplace of potential, that Africa produces great leaders, that Africa is this place where young people are leading changes in their communities, where Africa is not a dark continent, but it's a continent of light, but also that it's not the continent of warfare and ethnic cleansing, but rather it's the continent of understanding that, yes, people are different to me, but what can I learn from their differences? I would love for us to get to a stage as a continent where we stop using terms like North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, where those from North Africa are no longer grappling with whether or not they can be African, where a Muslim Nigerian does not have to feel undermined by a Christian Nigerian. Also, where South Africans don't feel the need to attack Zimbabweans in the country that they're sharing because of this perception of one taking one another's resources. So I want us to get to an Africa where, and this is speaking more towards international development terms, but where in terms of our economic progress, we are charting our own development, where we are saying, you know what, you can come into our country, whether you're the US or you're China or you're India, you can come into our country, but this is the value I want you to add to my country. And this is what I want you to leave by, because this is in line with my own growth plans as a government. So I want that Africa. I want this strong, unified Africa that is working together to ensure that these statuses of non-belonging and being not African enough or being not too African, or going to a group of young kids and asking them, who's a great African leader? And immediately they'll say, Obama. Like, I want young people to change these perceptions. And I think we're getting there. And I think that our program is a good starting point for us to get there. And it contributes to one of the many programs out there.
Reanne, what would you say so when was Africa Matters formed? I believe it was 3 years ago. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
So April 2015.
In the 3 years that you've been operational and you've been seeing the program grow, what would you say has been your biggest accomplishment?
Ooh, I do believe our biggest accomplishment is reaching over 13,000 African youth. That's one of it. But then secondly, our ambassadors program that we launched this year, which is a pilot, which we are definitely thinking about continuing next year. We honestly thought that we would receive 50 applications, and we received well over 600, stemming from the 4 countries I mentioned: Kenya, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, and Namibia. And I think that was one of the biggest achievements for both Farai and I, because we then felt like the work that we were doing wasn't in vain, that we are actually getting people to start thinking about themselves as leaders, and then also thinking about what role AMI plays in the continent when it comes to the dialogue of youth leadership.
Farai, tell me you gave a really powerful TEDx talk why don't you tell me about it and the premise behind it, and for anyone who hasn't listened to it or watched it, what you spoke about and why it was important for you to speak about that subject.
Super, super. So yes, the TED Talk was titled "We Are the Ones We've Been Waiting For," which is a very, very popular saying. And just to do some quick marketing, Africa Matters currently has cool T-shirt written "We Are the Ones We've Been Waiting For." So I want to encourage as many people as possible to get them. They're going to be available in all countries very soon. So pre-orders are currently accepted. But I digress. So what is amazing is that, I mean, I got the opportunity to do a TED Talk last year in Germany. And I wasn't even sure how the audience would accept me because I was the only Black person speaking, the only non-German speaking, the only African speaking. So, and it's interesting because it's very easy in those moments to want to do something very, very generic so that you can appeal to the audience. But I said, I want to stay true to Africa Matters. I want to stay true to the belief we have as a team that we as young people need to stop waiting for someone else to fix our issues. We need to stop waiting for someone else to be the one that's going to uplift the continent. We need to be the ones that actively do it. And the notion that unfortunately is fed to us by the world is that you can only start making change when you've reached a certain age. So for as long as you are still in school, whether that is primary school, high school, or university, you're not really that capable of making a change. And to make a change, you need years of work experience. And I mean, at least in the South African context, that's what's drummed into you, that you can only really become an entrepreneur after you've got at least 5 years of work experience and you understand a different perspective of things. And I think that's a very outdated view because of the fact that I think, firstly, the African continent can't afford to wait for all of us to go through those journeys in life because change is needed now. It's not needed in 5 years after I've worked at a corporate for 5 years. It's needed for me to make it now. And I need to get to a point where playing my role as early as possible becomes accepted within our context. I think the other reason is that if we tell young people that they can only make changes at a later stage in their lives, we kill their creativity. Young people are incredibly creative. And it's important that we cultivate that and we nourish that when they're still in school or even younger than that, so that they can start to contribute to society a lot earlier. So the point of the talk that I gave, and I shared the story of how Africa Matters was conceptualized, how it was when we were within university and how it's grown incredibly, is it was to show people that we need to be bold in making changes now. I was not going to wait for another Thomas Sankara to come and tell us the things we need to hear before we start making change. It was important for Reanne and I and the rest of our team to start this process as early as possible. And I think that what the Africa Matters story shows you is that in life, it's so possible to balance things. Reanne and I are both doing 100 things while we run Africa Matters, and it is possible. And we want to continue to grow this organization and grow with it until one day we get to a stage where we're working for AMI full time. And in every school we go into, every talk we do, a big part of our programs is this aspect of social entrepreneurship, where we say to the young people, you've learned leadership skills, you've learned soft skills. Now conceptualize an idea, work with your colleagues, and it must be an idea that addresses an issue in your school or your community, and try and create something sustainable around it. And through this, you meet the most incredible young people that are just buzzing with ideas, and we can't wait to continue to grow this program. But essentially, as African youth, we need to be proactive in the changes that we make. And I think all the programs that we run at Africa Matters fit into this belief that we are the ones we've been waiting for.
So, Reanne, for many young people, I'm going to guess that they feel, as you rightly pointed out, Farai, I'm young, I can't really make an impact, I don't have money. What would you say to young people about the difference that they have the potential to make?
I think, first of all, that they should just do it. I think just having the perception that they cannot do it shows that they won't be able to do it. Whatever you put out in this universe is what you're going to receive. And I am a huge advocate of that, because that's a testament that I've had in my own life. And that as youth, You don't have to worry about being educated. You don't have to worry about having money. You don't have to worry about work experience. I think if you have a great idea and you are truly passionate about it and you continuously work on that craft, even if you have to, have a career. Farai and I have careers, for example, but we are very passionate about Africa Matters, and our dream is to make Africa Matters our full-time jobs. I think it's just to do it, just talk to people because you never know, there's many people who are doing the same, who might have the same ideas as you, or who complements your skill set. Talk to people, communicate with people, try to get your dream off the ground. Contact people. That's what we did. We didn't know how receptive we would be by many of the partners or sponsors that we received, but just being true to yourself, being true to your mission. I definitely think that there is so much possibility within any and every sector that the youth want to get into. Just do it. Don't think about the negative aspects of it. Yes, there are going to be challenges on your way, but don't allow the challenges to adhere you from actually reaching the goals that you want to achieve.
Farai, Reanne just said there will be challenges along the way. What would you say have been your biggest challenges as you've started on this journey with Africa Matters?
Definitely funding. It's really been a challenge for Reanne and I. We've put so much of our own money into growing Africa Matters. And I mean, we don't always have the luxury to do that, but when we can, we do. And I think funding has been a challenge because it is very difficult to convince people to buy into Africa Matters for two reasons. And not people, I mean, young people buy into Africa Matters and love the concept, but I think to convince investors. And the first reason in that Reanne and I are both young, we're both Black, and we're both women. So very often we meet people that say to us, "Wow, guys, this is great, but like, are you guys sure that you're old enough to run such an organization?" This particularly happens a lot to me, when people will be like, "Yeah, but you're still a baby. How can you manage this?" And I'm like, "I'm very, very capable of doing this." And we still have a lot of elements of ageism, and then also these issues of gender. Reanne and I are both women. We're both very fierce, but then the issues of, but can these women really, really run this? That's still definitely there in the philanthropy forum or the development world. It's still very, very there. I think the other challenge that we face is that it is difficult to quantify empowerment. So when we have pitched at different competitions, I mean, there's a lot of investors that want to know, what am I going to get in return and how can I measure it immediately? And through our programs, I mean, we have tried to remeasure and relook our programs to make sure that we can measure the impact. But what has been really difficult is to say that, okay, I mean, if I am at a school and I do a 4-week program with 30 students, and I teach them leadership, soft skills, social entrepreneurship, and they pitch their ideas, they are growing, they are being empowered, the ideas that they pitch are what is tangible. But a lot of your investors want to be like, okay, but where's the actual product for this? And we always try to get them to see that actually, if you are investing in African youth, you are investing in this emerging youth demographic. You are investing in young people that have the skills and tools to deal with complex African issues. Now, the challenge that we face in different forums is that there's a lot of people that want to say, okay, no, I want to put, let's say, $500,000 towards antiretrovirals for AIDS, or $500,000 towards food security. And they like that because these are measurable aspects of it. And my argument and Reanne's argument to these views is that, but you need to equip the people that are going to administer the money that you invest into food security or HIV and AIDS preventative diseases. If you are addressing those longer term issues, you need to equip young people with the skills and tools so that they can be the ones that then drive this initiative. There's no use in just investing so much money into these what are deemed traditional African issues if you're not investing in the young people that will take this money and make it effective within their communities. So I think definitely those for me have been the biggest two challenges that we've faced.
And based on what you said about the challenges that you face in trying to raise money and how you pitch yourselves to prospective investors, I'm interested to know and this is a question to both of you, what is the impact that you want to have in the world? And this is both on a personal level as well as with Africa Matters.
Well, I guess I'll say from my end that the impact that I want Africa Matters to have on the world is just to show the world that African youth have full potential to do whatever it is that needs to be done in the world.
And for you, Farai, what is the impact that you want to have?
Absolutely. I think that Reanne and I are 100% in sync. So everything she said, she's definitely captured my thoughts. I think that I would just add that I want Africa Matters to be more than just an organization. It needs to be a mentality. It needs to be this mentality that is so entrenched in young Africans that they say, you know what, my continent matters and I'm going to make sure it matters. I'm going to contribute to changing my own community. I want this idea of Africa rising to be the norm. And I think the impact that Africa Matters needs to have on young people is that it's okay to start making change early. In fact, that it's necessary to start making change early because your continent is important, because you need to play an active role in growing your continent, because your continent is not just for you to live in, but for you to grow within and create opportunities for others.
What do you think is your purpose?
So great that you asked me that question, because I've been for so many job interviews and they ask me that same thing. And I always say one response. I always say my purpose is to make an impact. And it's so broad. And I think it's broad for a reason. I think it's because for me, I am happy as long as I am making an impact in the lives of others. So wherever I am working, whatever work I am doing, as long as I'm having an impact, then I think I'm definitely living out my truth. And we actually had a networking evening last night where someone walked up to me and said, Farai, it's great to know that as young as you are already living your purpose. You're already living God's plan for your life. And I want to continue to do that. You know, I think that it's possible for us to do that. I think it's definitely about networking. I think networking is so important. It's about meeting people that will inspire you to live your truth. You know, when I was making my decision about where to work full-time from September, it was between a bank and then two other great institutions of impact. And for me, working at the bank would have been incredible, great salary, whatever. And I still would have done impact work in terms of racial and gender transformation. But I felt like that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to wake up every morning to know that I'm only going to help a small segment in terms of impact. And more than that, a small segment that may not have a very big ripple effect on the lives of others. For me, working for where I'll be working, which is the Aurum Institute, a TB and HIV research institute, then I know that I am going to have a big impact, even if it's through doing different projects with the organization. I know that the ripple effects, not only in South Africa, but across the continent are there. So yeah, my purpose is to make an impact. And what does impact mean? We don't know, but we explore and experiment every day.
Reanne, what would you say for you is your purpose? And what is impact as well for you?
It's so funny because Farai is doing this to me, and luckily you asked her first. So I was going to say the exact same thing in terms of impact. Any and everything that I do is around impacting those that are around me or who I feel very close to. And how I would define impact for myself is just, it's a challenging question, but something tangible. How do I know that what I'm doing, if I write an article or if I'm giving an interview or if I'm just speaking to someone, how do I know what I am saying and what I'm putting out there is benefiting that individual? And for me, when I actually see that people start to progress in life, they start taking different paths in life to be able to achieve their goals, then for me, I'm totally fulfilled. That for me is impact. That's my definition of impact. And that's what I think my purpose is.
Reanne, when you hear the word successful, who's the first person that comes to mind for you?
Oh, I guess it depends on the definition of successful, but
you can choose to define it however you want to define it.
Yeah, so the first person who came to mind, and I don't want to sound arrogant, but I think about myself. And it's not on the financial aspect. I think I'm very successful in terms of the obstacles that I went through in my life to get to the point that I am now, the support system that I have, and that to me equates to success. I'm co-running an organization that impacts over 13 to 15,000 African youth. That's success within itself. We come up with ideas and seeing it being executed, and then it goes the way that we've imagined or even better. That's success for me.
That is a phenomenal answer. I really love that. It doesn't require an apology that it may sound arrogant. That's a beautiful answer, Reanne. That is a really beautiful answer. And I'm grateful to you for sharing that. Farai, turning to you, what are you most grateful for?
Well, I am grateful for a lot of things. I think first and foremost, it's the fact that God has really, really, really blessed me with different skills and talents that I think are not usually accessed by people my age. And what I mean by that is that I often meet people who say, "Oh my word, how can you achieve this? You're so young, you're so young." And it's definitely because I've really, really been blessed with with so many different skills and such passion for people that I'm always keen to impart the skills and the knowledge that I have onto other people, but also to learn from others. So I'm definitely very, very grateful for serving a good God, I think, is the first response. I think secondly, it's coming from a family that, while broken, has still managed to just achieve great things. I mean, my mom is so supportive. Oh my word, one of the most supportive people that I have in my life. And always there in my corner, always wanting the best for me. Really, really, really such a trooper. I mean, she was even at the networking evening last night, making sure that things were going okay, and it was just so great to see the pride on her face, knowing that, damn, like, I produced this, So it's definitely, and I mean, not just my mom, my sister as well, my grandmother. I really, really come from a very, very supportive family. And I don't think that's often the case for many, many people. I mean, you could even tell when I decided not to do financial accounting anymore because I didn't want to be a CA. I think most parents would have discouraged their kids. But my mom was like, okay, that's fine. As long as you know that you're going to get a good job after university, that's okay. And that was great. And even now with making very, very tough career decisions, I mean, we had some discussions and arguments here and there, but eventually understanding where my purpose lies and being like, okay, let's make this decision. I think I'm also very, very grateful for being able to surround myself with amazing people who inspire me to be much better. I mean, someone said to me last night, "Well, Farai, you are the plug." And I was reflecting on that this morning, thinking,
What?
I was reflecting on that this morning, thinking, but it's true because, I mean, I've got Reanne in my corner. I've got my friend Tembi, who is an educator who wants to actually start a platform for African educators. I've got my friend Kanya, who also runs a youth entrepreneurship organization, and these are just a few of the amazing people around me who are just doing incredible work, and who I just really, really, really adore. So I'm just really, really grateful for so many things in my life, and also grateful for the opportunities that will continue to come through.
Farai, just in ending, what is the best advice that you've ever been given?
Oh, it sounds so cliche, but Reanne and I always say this to each other. We always say, "Do you, boo boo, do you?" And And the reason is because it falls exactly into this slogan we have, that we are the ones we've been waiting for. I think as people, we need to do things that make us happy. We need to do things that give us a sense of purpose.
You guys have been amazing. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Where can people find you on social media or online? Where can they find you?
Farai.
So, so our Facebook. So you can find us on Facebook. Our Africa Matters is a Facebook page called Africa Matters. It's very, very easy to find. We're the first option that pops up there. You can then find us on Instagram. Our Instagram handle is @AfricaMatters2015. You can find us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @AfricaMatters15. And we are also on LinkedIn. And I think what's awesome is that we're always willing to connect. So please reach out. We encourage as many people to do it as possible. Yeah, let's grow Africa Matters. And particularly if you are an investor or a philanthropist who wants to give to a good cause, give us your money and we will show you the impact that we have.
One final question. I'll start with you, Reanne, because I know you have to run. This platform is called Ndini, which in my mother tongue, Shona, means I am. Can you finish that sentence for me? I am.
I am great. I am wonderful. I'm amazing.
And you, Farai, please finish that sentence for me. I am.
I am me. I am who I am. I am here to be a change maker.
Thank you so much, truly. Thank you for what you're doing. I know there are many struggles and challenges along the journey, but keep doing what you're doing because we need more of you and we need to empower ourselves as Africans to believe what is possible for ourselves.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it. And thank you for your platform. It is incredible.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ndini podcast. I don't take even a single listener for granted. As you know, my goal with this platform is to help shift and change the narrative on Africa, and in particular about African women. But I need your help to do that. Please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. You can also follow us on SoundCloud. And please share. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. It helps me to bring great guests to the show, and it also helps others discover the podcast. And of course, I always want to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my conversation with our guest today and what you took away from it or what inspired you. I'd also love to hear from you if you have suggestions for other women you think I should absolutely have on the show. Our handle on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is @Ndini Media. Or you can reach out to me through our website, which is ndini.com. That's NDINI.com. Until next time, I'm Sandra Chuma. Be well.